When Michael Maccabee arrived in Mexico in the late 1950s, he was a young Harvard graduate who had studied philosophy and social relations. He had been searching for something more than academic theory, something that could connect the abstract ideas of psychology to real human lives. That search led him to Erich Fromm, who was then living in Cuernavaca, teaching at the National Autonomous University of Mexico and helping to run the newly founded Mexican Institute of Psychoanalysis. For Maccabee, this encounter was transformative. He did not just study under Fromm, he absorbed his worldview and began shaping his own career around the questions Fromm cared most about. Fromm had already become internationally known for works such as Escape from Freedom and The Sane Society. These books combined Freud's psychoanalytic insight with Marx's social critique, asking how the structure of society shapes character and how individuals often give up freedom in exchange for security. Maccabee, eager to understand the modern individual in a rapidly changing world, found Fromm's approach to be exactly what he had been looking for. Where Freud had focused narrowly on family dynamics and unconscious drives, Fromm widened the lens to include economics, politics, and culture. For Maccabee, this meant that psychology could not be separated from the workplace, from leadership, or from the institutions that shaped everyday life. Under Fromm's guidance, Maccabee studied psychoanalysis in depth, but also something more subtle, a humanistic concern for the dignity of the individual. Fromm insisted that therapy was not just about fixing neuroses, but about enabling people to live more fully, to overcome alienation, and to find authentic connections with others. Maccabee would later apply this to his work with executives and organizations, but at the time it was a radical education that shaped the rest of his intellectual journey. Living in Mexico also meant being part of Fromm's circle of colleagues, which included social critics, psychoanalysts, and political thinkers. Discussions often turned to how capitalism shaped personality, the way markets encouraged people to become commodities themselves, selling not just their labor, but their personalities in order to survive and succeed. Fromm called this the marketing orientation, and he saw it as the dominant character type of modern industrial society. Maccabee listened closely, and this theme would become the seed for some of his most important later works. During these years, Maccabee was struck by Fromm's insistence that psychology could not remain neutral. Fromm believed that a psychologist or psychoanalyst had a moral responsibility to speak about the conditions that harmed human growth, whether authoritarian politics, dehumanizing technology, or consumer culture. Maccabee absorbed this sense of responsibility. He was not content simply to be a therapist or an academic. He wanted to study leaders, managers, and workers in their real settings, and to show how psychology could explain both their struggles and their potential. One of the most important lessons Maccabee took from Fromm was the idea of social character. Fromm argued that while every individual is unique, societies encourage certain shared personality patterns that make the economic system function smoothly. For example, a capitalist society might produce competitive, achievement-driven personalities, while a feudal society produced obedient and tradition-bound ones. Maccabee later built on this idea, applying it to leadership in corporations. He showed that different eras of business history fostered different leadership types, from bureaucratic managers to charismatic gamesmen. This perspective shaped Maccabee's groundbreaking research with AT&T executives in the 1960s and 1970s. By analyzing leaders through the lens of Fromm's social character, Maccabee revealed how corporate culture created particular kinds of people and how those people in turn shaped the institutions they led. His famous book, The Gamesman, 1976, grew directly out of this Frommian influence, describing a new type of manager who thrived on competition, strategy, and risk-taking. Part of what made the collaboration between Fromm and Maccabee so rich was the combination of wisdom and youth. Fromm, already in his 60s, brought decades of psychoanalytic practice and philosophical reflection. Maccabee, in his 20s, brought curiosity, energy, and the desire to test these ideas in the modern corporate world. Together, they bridged two domains: humanistic psychoanalysis and organizational psychology that had rarely been connected before. By the early 1960s, Maccabee had become not only a student, but also a collaborator. He worked with Fromm on research projects, participated in seminars, and carried forward the humanistic spirit of his mentor. While Fromm never created a school, his influence lived on through Maccabee, who translated Fromm's insights into a new field, the psychology of leadership and work. Part 2 will explore how Maccabee developed these ideas in his own career, and how Fromm and Maccabee connected helped shape the modern study of leadership, work culture, and the search for meaning in organizations. After his formative years in Mexico with Erich Fromm, Michael Maccabee returned to the United States, carrying a powerful framework that combined psychoanalysis, sociology, and moral philosophy. But instead of following the conventional path of becoming a clinical analyst, Maccabee asked, "What happens if we take these insights into the heart of modern society, into the workplace, the corporation, the very engine of industrial life?" In doing so, he extended Fromm's legacy into areas Fromm himself had not fully explored. Fromm had warned about the marketing character, the personality shaped by the need to sell oneself in a competitive market economy. Maccabee saw this type firsthand in American executives. With support from Harvard and later the Harvard Business School, he began a decades-long project of studying leaders in corporations such as AT&T, later extending his research to global companies. He interviewed executives not only as managers but as human beings, probing their motivations, fears, and ideals. What he found was striking. These leaders were not just rational decision-makers. They were deeply shaped by the same cultural and social forces Fromm had described. In 1976, Maccabee published The Gamesmen, The New Corporate Leaders. The book made waves because it gave a name and a profile to a new type of leader emerging in post-war America. The gamesman was competitive, restless, and fascinated by strategy and innovation. Unlike the older organization man, who valued stability and loyalty, the gamesman thrived on constant change and challenge. This was more than a management theory. It was an application of Fromm's social character analysis to the world of business. Maccabee showed that corporations didn't just employ people, they shaped people, cultivating personalities suited to their needs. Maccabee continued to develop this line of work in later books such as Why Work? And The Leaders We Need. Here, the influence of Fromm is unmistakable. Like his mentor, Maccabee was deeply concerned with meaning. He asked not only how leaders succeeded, but whether their leadership helped people live more fulfilling lives. Could work be more than a paycheck? Could organizations be designed to enhance human growth rather than stifle it? These were Frommian questions reframed in the context of modern capitalism. Perhaps the most direct continuation of Fromm's humanism in Maccabee's work was his emphasis on the moral dimension of leadership. Fromm had argued that neutrality in psychology was an illusion. To be human is to take responsibility for others. Maccabee carried this into leadership studies, showing that great leaders were not just technically competent, but ethically grounded. He warned of narcissistic leaders who exploited followers, echoing Fromm's critiques of authoritarianism and destructiveness. At the same time, he highlighted the potential of visionary leaders who could inspire, much like Fromm's ideal of a productive, life-affirming character. The collaboration between Maccabee and Fromm also had a lasting personal dimension. They remained close for decades, and Maccabee frequently credited Fromm for shaping his worldview. In interviews, he recalled long conversations with Fromm about politics, technology, and the future of humanity. Fromm's combination of compassion and critical sharpness stayed with him. Even as Maccabee became an authority in his own right, working with governments, corporations, and think tanks, he continued to see himself as carrying forward Fromm's humanistic tradition. One striking example of this continuity is Maccoby's work on technology and work culture. As automation and digitalization transformed workplaces, Maccoby asked how these changes affected not just efficiency but human character. This echoed Fromm's concern that technology, if left unchecked, could lead to alienation. Maccoby argued that for technology to serve humanity, leaders had to think beyond profit and consider dignity, meaning and purpose, a profoundly Frommian perspective. By the time of Fromm's death in 1980, Maccoby had already established himself as a leading thinker. Yet he always framed his contributions as extensions of what he had learned from his teacher. Where Fromm had connected Freud and Marx, Maccoby connected psychoanalysis to the realities of modern leadership and organizations. He proved that Fromm's insights were not confined to the therapist's office or the pages of philosophy, but could illuminate the lives of executives, workers, and entire industries. Today, looking back, one can see their collaboration as a bridge across generations. Fromm represented the critical European intellectual tradition of the mid-20th century, while Maccoby represented its American application in the age of corporations and globalization. Without Fromm, Maccoby might never have developed his unique perspective on leadership. Without Maccoby, Fromm's ideas might have remained confined to social critique rather than influencing the practice of business and leadership. The story of their collaboration is a reminder that great teachers do not produce disciples so much as independent thinkers. Fromm did not create a school, but in Maccoby he found a student who would carry forward his spirit in new directions. In this way, their relationship embodies one of Fromm's central convictions, that the task of life is not to conform, but to become fully human, creatively shaping one's world. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe.